and I didn't want nothing to do with them at all.
What made him so filthy?
The way they lived, their habits, I mean, their eating habits and the way they lived and how they lived, just like a little instance, I mean, their homes, they didn't have wood floors or carpet or linoleum or anything like that. All they had was mud floors. And they didn't have a kitchen like what you or I have, or what we have. They had like this is a house. There was no front door to the house. On one end of the house, it didn't make any difference what end it was because the sun didn't make any difference. The wind made no difference or anything. But say they built the house like this, and it could be square, but this would be a floor level. It's all mud. And then they come over here on this end and they dug it out to about 6 or 7 feet below this elevation. Made that a mud floor down there. And then they made mud and dirt shelves down there. And right in underneath the house, at the beginning of the house, they had a mud, a dirt hearth. And that's where they made their fire for their cooking and all that. And then when they created the floor, they made a tube that was about that wide and about that high, and it went from here all the way through. And then in some cases, it would come in, wrap around, and come back out, and then go that way. And same thing here. And then they'd have a chimney on this end of the building. So the heat, they would start the stove here, their fire, and the smoke and all that, the chimney would go in underneath all of these rooms or these channels. And that's how they heated their house. There was no partitions in the house. They had screens that folded up. One night you may sleep here, and the next night you may sleep over here or wherever. And then they seemed like they had kind of in the middle of the house. They had no tables or anything like that. They all sat around. They had what they called a common what the heck is it? Com- I can't remember the name of it anymore. Kumchi pot, and it was a big pot, about yay big, about that high, and had a clay lid on it. And this is how they cooked most of their meals, is in this pot. And at times they had several of them, and at times they would take vegetables and all types of vegetables, cut them up, and put them in this pot. Then they would take and add some liquid to it. What kind of liquid, I have no idea. And then they would take it out to a field that the Papazon had for his farm. And they would bury this pot. And it would sit in there for days or even a week or whatever. And when it become ripe, then they'd go retrieve it. And they'd bring it back into the house and set it on the floor, take the lid off of it, and then Mamazon would have cooked some rice or something like that. Very bland diet. They didn't have, well, they didn't cook like America does. And then they'd all gather around this pot sitting on the floor. and they dip into this pot with their rice or whatever, and that's a common meal. And stink like hell. Ooh, it would drive a snipe off a gut wagon. It's pretty dang ripe. I mean, the longer it sat out there, the riper it got. And oh my God, freeze. So, and then they would have a cow, and they'd have a couple dogs, but they'd eat the dog and let the cow run.
Why?
I have no idea. I don't know. But I've seen that many a time where they would eat the damn dog and let the cow be. So now, whether they were religious people, I have no idea. I never seen a church, a Korean church, all the time that I was over there. So, and their towns, well, you see some of these old westerns where they have wood sidewalks and stuff like that. That's the way their towns were. No paved streets or anything like that. No niceties whatsoever. So,
It'd be kind of interesting to see
well,
how
now it's
different,
entirely different.
right?
But, yeah. But when I was there, it was, I mean, it was just like a page out of the past. I mean, nothing nice at all. The school was just an old building with a lot of hay and stuff in it, and so was a. I run in my time. We were taking cities or towns, and we took one building as a house, and evidently it was a doctor. Had been a doctor's office because he had his doctor tools in there, or we figured that's what it was. Because they were miniature hammers and saws and stuff like that, and pliers, you know. So, and they weren't in a leather bag; they were in a wood bag, a wood box with a handle on it. But we figured that it was, medical, of some type. So, the only way it was safe to sleep in those places was burn it down and sleep on the mud floor because it'd be warm. Yeah, really bad. Um, but anyway,
That's interesting.